Hello there and welcome. This is going to be another one of my reviews. However, this time it's going to be a little bit different. This time I want to talk about The Simpsons. You see, The Simpsons is something that I still quite enjoy. Sure, the modern episodes aren't that great, but the classic episodes are certainly brilliant. And in this series that I want to do, it's going to be a little bit different, as I mentioned earlier. In the sense that I want to review every single episode of The Simpsons, season by season. Obviously, this is going to be the first series, so go figure. Obviously, unlike some other reviews, it's not going to be scripted. It's going to be a bit more spontaneous. Hence why I'm going to be stuttering a bit and umming quite a bit. So sorry about that. If you want scripted fakeness, if you desire. However, obviously I'm going to give my thoughts and opinions on each episode of The Simpsons throughout each series. Obviously, when it comes to The Simpsons as a whole, I do only own the first 11 seasons on DVD, so those ones are easy to access, which should give you a clue on what I think of The Simpsons after series 11, but we'll get there when we get there. As a result, when it comes to season 12 onwards, I'm gonna have to be a bit more slower with that. I'm gonna have to look online for some videos. Nonetheless, I hope you enjoy these videos, and let's start off with series 1, shall we? Series 1, for those that don't know, came out in 1990 or 1989, according to the DVD which I've got with me right now. In fact, it does say around here, yeah, it says right here, between 1989 and 1990 was when they aired the first series of The Simpsons. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's just Matt Groening being false with us, or giving us incorrect information, I should say. Nonetheless, first series of The Simpsons, most people seem to think of it as a prime example of first season syndrome. In other words, it's very cheap, it's not as good, it's quite slow, everything's trying to introduce us to something new, and that is somewhat true. Obviously I'm going to give my full thoughts on series 1 when I have finished reviewing every episode. As a whole, though, people seem to put down series 1 quite a bit. They don't hate it, but they don't think it's good, if you know what I mean. It's one of those seasons that tends to get 50-50, and then obviously series 2 came out and that blew everything out the park and really revolutionised Simpsons as a whole. But without further ado, let's start off with our first episode of series 1. Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire is the first ever episode of The Simpsons, and a lot of people may get quite confused when seeing this because it's titled The Simpsons Christmas Special, and a lot of people would think a Christmas special would be something that would happen at the end of the series or midway through the series or something like that. However, for those that don't know, The Simpsons originally started out as animated shorts throughout the 80s. And during the 80s they gained some popularity. Obviously, if you've ever seen these animated shorts, you'll know that the animation is totally different. The looks of the characters is completely different to what they would look like now. A lot of the features were exaggerated in the early days. You know, for example, the top lips are always poking outwards. Marge's hair was quite thick. It wasn't as long as it was. It's quite thick and shorter. Homer's behaviour wasn't the dumbass, he was the angry dad who got pissed off with everything, and even the shirts and what have you, they're all different. Everything in these shorts is different. They of course then slowly evolved and then they became The Simpsons that we all know and love. The first ever episode of The Simpsons is in fact a special for those animated shorts. It isn't actually a genuine episode, if you get what I mean. So the whole summary of the episode is that The Simpsons are celebrating Christmas. It starts off with Homer, Marge and Maggie seeing the kid, Bart and Lisa doing a Christmas performance Lisa does this really weird tiki dance. We even have Ralph Wiggum, who is so different to what you'd become. Like, here he seems somewhat intelligent and kooky. He isn't like the complete brain-dead moron that we later would know. In fact, a lot of the background characters, a lot of the minor kid characters or major kid characters are somewhat unusual, to say the very least. You can definitely tell this is the early days, because they not only do they sound a little bit high-pitched and different, they look different as well. Because Sherry and Terry, in the first ever episode, if you look closely, you will notice that they aren't white-skinned with brown with purple hair. They're actually yellow-skinned with brown hair. Obviously, there are some other like minor differences here and there. Some characters aren't as pale as others. Some characters aren't even black, and some characters are. It's interesting to say the very least. So obviously, after this performance, they then write up Christmas lists, and Bart wants a tattoo. Bart then eventually gets a tattoo because they go into the mall. They decide to get each other gifts, and Bart gets a tattoo. The tattoo costs a lot of money, and as a result, to get it lasers off, it costs even more money. So they waste all their Christmas funds on the tattoo. This results in Homer having to work harder and get a job as one of the mall Santas. One of the mall Santas, trying to get some more money to essentially buy presents for the kids. It doesn't go according to plan. He gets fired, and at the very end, they go to the Springfield Downs. They bet on the dog. The dog just so happens to be Santa's little helper, who they end up adopting because the owner was disgraced by his performance, and they adopt the dog. The dog, it becomes their Christmas present as a whole, and it's a happy ending in the end. So what do I really like about this? Firstly, I like how they're trying to introduce all the characters. I like how they're trying to introduce all the personalities that these characters are going to have. You know, Bart is the little brat, he's the bad kid. You know, Lisa is the sensible one, Maggie's the baby. Homer is the working class dad, you know. Marge is a stay-at-home wife. And they try to introduce them a little bit too hard, like they sort of force it in your face, like what this character is going to be like. This is what this character is going to be like. Obviously to give them more personality. You know, you even get like a somewhat introduction to the sisters, Patty and Selma, and yeah, a lot of it is very much a first episode pilot, if you know what I mean. It's definitely forcing itself to be, this is what the show is going to be like, this is what this character is going to be, this is what this character is going to be like. And it isn't, it's like that for like the first half, and then in the second half you actually get a bit more of a story. You actually see Homer having to work hard to try and get money for his kids to buy presents and all that. And you feel bad for Homer, because Homer is trying his best. He is doing a good job at it, and I really do like that aspect of the story, and I do like the ending. The ending is, you know, they don't really succeed in getting money, they don't really succeed in getting presents, but they do get a dog, and this dog symbolises, you know, unity, to be a family at Christmas time, and it's a happy ending. It's a jolly little episode. Obviously it's a special, it's not necessarily an official Simpsons episode, and if I was to give it a rating out of 10, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. It's a decent enough episode, but it's not something to rave home about. Bart the Genius just so happens to be one of the first ever episodes of The Simpsons that I remember seeing. Obviously it isn't the first. I know what the first episode of The Simpsons I saw. I don't remember its title precisely, but it's the episode where Homer becomes a bodyguard and Mark Hamill's in it. I remember that being the first episode because I remember having a VHS tape of The Simpsons. Nonetheless, Bart the Genius, I should say. There is quite a few Bart the in this episode, in this series. But Bart the Genius is an episode which is the first, some would argue, the official episode of The Simpsons. You know, we've been introduced to the characters already, and from this point on, yeah, just going straight into storytelling. In this episode, Bart cheats on a test. He uses Martin's score, and he decides to use that as his own work during a test, and as a result, the teacher is Mrs. Krabappel is surprised at his intellect, his intelligence, because Bart is always a disruptive kid. He's always the one which, you know, is causing all the trouble, and here he's actually done brilliantly, and so this child psychiatrist believes that Bart is secretly a brilliant genius. He's just hiding it, and he sends him off to this really intelligent, super high-tech school, and as a result, the family also have to try and adapt Bart, or adapt to Bart's standards. Lisa's the only one that can see through the lies, and Homer obviously is so proud of his son. Marge is trying her best to try and force this intellect into Bart to make him a bit more, more out there, I should say, as opposed to being introverted. Obviously, the truth is, Bart is still a dumbass. He cheated on the test, and, you know, it's a case of a mishap, I should say. So this episode introduces quite a few characters, in particular Martin. Martin, we get a little bit of what Martin's going to be like throughout the series. He's the smart ass. He's the type of idiot that, I say idiot, he's actually the intelligent one here. He's the type of guy that, always snitches on a character. He's the type of guy that always says to the teacher, hey, aren't you meant to be doing this? Or, shouldn't you be giving us homework at this time? And, it's that sort of, you get that introduction to that character. Obviously he isn't like as funny as he would become, because Martin does become an hilarious character in later episodes. And one to look out for, obviously, but in this episode it doesn't really do him much justice. He's not as interesting as you may think. The idea of the psychiatrist asking Bart, like, do you find school boring? Do you find those around you, do you get annoyed by them, And Bart obviously is going to reply, yes, obviously he is. And, when he comes down to it, the idea is he thinks that Bart is intelligent. Bart isn't. He's just a kid. He's just a little kid who doesn't like school. Simple as that, but obviously this psychiatric, because The Simpsons does this quite a lot in later episodes. They take the piss out of psychiatrics and psychologists. In fact, in this season you're going to find out another example whereby they're always trying to be all snarmy and smart, and trying to persuade this character to do this, and obviously that character's going to reply with yes, because that's just what you do. And I do like that aspect, the fact that he is just a kid just answering the questions as honestly as he possibly could, obviously misinterpreting the consequences. What do I not like? A lot of the episode is spent with the smart kids, and what I do sort of like is the fact that the smart kids aren't necessarily friendly. They are kind of dickheads. That said, it is quite a slow episode, on the second half. The first half, you have all this build up, you get introduced to this, you then get this, you get that, you get how the family members are reacting to Bart's new intelligence. And I do quite like that. And in the second half, it sort of just slows down a bit, and you don't get anything until Bart then screws up and admits that he cheated on the test, And I guess you could argue that's a happy ending, but it's an alright episode. I do quite like this episode. I don't think it's brilliant, obviously. I don't think it's revolutionary. It's still quite stuttery. It still suffers from, first series syndrome, I guess you could argue. But aside from that, I still find it enjoyable. I still find it, a good watch, and I totally recommend it. I personally would say this deserves an 8 out of 10. Just because it is a good episode, it's just sort of slow in some places. So, you want to know the darkest episode of The Simpsons ever? Well, pardon me. I would do that. Do you want to know the darkest episode of The Simpsons ever? Well, episode 3 of series 1 gives you the darkest episode of The Simpsons ever. Homer's Odyssey is a pretty fucked up episode. What I mean by fucked up, I mean Homer tries to kill himself. What I mean by tries to kill himself, I mean he literally writes a suicide note and ties a rock around his waist and attempts to jump into a river. That is how dark we get. The episode starts off with a field trip to the nuclear power plant. They talk about how nuclear energy is all safe and happy and all that. And, you know, Bart is teased by Sherry and Terry, whose father works at the power plant, so does Bart's father. And Bart's father is a fool. He's bumbling about. He doesn't really do things correctly, and he eventually gets fired by his manager. His manager just so happens to be Sherry and Terry's father, who for whatever reason is black in this episode, and they're as pale can be, so that's a little bit weird, but that's not the only black character who shouldn't be black. Smithers is black in this episode. For whatever reason, throughout this episode, a lot of characters who are yellow, or at least, you know, white, I guess you could argue, are black in this episode, because Smithers is black, and he's got greyish blue hair, and the other one, Sherry and Terry's father, he's black as well, and they're clearly pale skin. That's something that should be noted, actually. The fact that this episode has a lot, and I mean a lot of mistakes in it. There's loads of animation errors here and there. Sherry and Terry, when they're teasing Bart, you'll notice that one of them, her whole body has disappeared and it's just a floating neck and a head. You know, it lingers on there, and you can see there's no body, it's just a neck and a head. And obviously then you have the black characters which shouldn't be black, and yeah, this episode is definitely filled with the errors. It's also an incredibly dark episode, as I mentioned earlier. Homer, after getting fired, he believes he's just a failure. He's not going to be, you know, the breadwinner for the family, and so he decides he's going to steal some money from Bart's piggy bank, but then he realises, no, he can't do that, and so he then decides to try and kill himself, and fuck me, that's so fucking dark. And it's quite disturbing to say at the very least, but the family run up, they save Homer from committing suicide, and Homer obviously in turn saves the family, because on the road it's extremely unsafe and a lorry is about to come and kill them, and of course he jumps out of the way and protects them. From this point on, Homer then becomes this labour protest leader, protesting against like the how do I put it, the unsafe roads, the unsafe working spaces here, there and everywhere, and that is essentially what is the driving force of the rest of the episode. Homer does this to protest against all the unsafety, the lack of safety I should say, in all these workplaces and roads, and then eventually he gets back to his power plant. And this is when for the first ever time, you see his boss, Mr. Burns. Yes, this is Mr. Burns' first ever appearance in The Simpsons. I also think this episode is the first ever time they actually have the introduction, you know, the Simpsons, and then you have, you know, everything else. I believe this might be the first episode to have an introduction as well as having Mr. Burns. Obviously, Mr. Burns is, you know, not 100% evil at this point. I mean, he's still a slimy bastard, and he does obviously want to trick Homer into, well, he wants to give Homer a job so he doesn't get in trouble. He is still that slimy little git, and you know, that does lead you up to what Mr. Burns is going to be like in future episodes. Obviously, introducing this character, you have to give him a bit of personality, a bit of like story to him. Mr. Burns' office is really weird looking in Series 1. You know, same with Moe's Tavern, actually. Both of them are awkward in terms of colour. Like, Mr. Burns' office is bright, and these windows are everywhere, and it's not even... And it almost looks like, you know, a holiday home. You know, a holiday home with a balcony. That's what it looks like. Same with Moe's Tavern, actually. Moe's Tavern isn't like a holiday home necessarily, but it's extremely dark and blue, and it's not really got any colour. It's just like blue with a bit more blue there and a bit of black there. That's it. But I digress. So eventually Homer does get a job at the power plant once again. Of course, it's the job that he eventually sticks with. And yeah, it ends just like that. There's no real ending to this other than Homer gets a job again. Yeah, I feel like they kind of rushed the ending a bit. Like, what about the labour force that he created? What about all the protests and all that? What about what he said earlier? It seems to fall flat just right at the end. And honestly, that combined with the animation errors and the dark moment with Homer trying to commit suicide, I don't really think this episode is as good. I will say Homer's Odyssey isn't an episode which I think is brilliant. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's that good. But I don't want to say it's bad either. I'm going to have to give this episode a 4 out of 10. It's not brilliant at all. It's an episode that you can clearly skip, and it's not an episode that I recommend you watching. The previous 2 episodes were fine. Obviously the second one is even better than the first. This one is a no-go. There's no disgrace like Homer's next episode. In this episode, Homer is embarrassed by his family after going out for a meeting with his boss, or well, a family's day out with the boss, that being Mr. Burns. And something you may notice is that Waylon Smithers is no longer black; he is now white. He still has the greyish blue hair, but he's white now. Just because reasons. So whereas the previous episode was kind of lazy, this episode tries to improve itself a bit. You know, this episode isn't as lazy as the previous episode. This episode does at least try to, create a bit more of an atmosphere. It does try to its best to create a bit more of a better story, something a bit more entertaining. And in this episode, after Homer becomes embarrassed, he decides that his family needs to change. They need to start acting proper. So, he goes snooping around, looking at other families through windows and seeing how good and well behaved the families are. It does create a really funny sequence when he snoops past, or the family snoop and look at a kid and his father, and the kid sees the father, and of course they can't hear what they're saying inside, and of course inside he's saying, there's some strange people looking outside, and of course the father says, why didn't you get me my gun? They don't understand that. Homer believes that, he's probably going after and getting him some nice cocoa, and of course it doesn't end that way. They try getting shot by the man's son, which is quite a funny sequence, I will admit. So eventually Homer decides to use all their life savings, sell off the TV, sell off all these items, just to have a psychiatric evaluation from, you guessed it, Melvin Monroe. Melvin Monroe, which is the original Professor Frink, you could argue, the really intelligent man from Springfield. And what I really like about Melvin Monroe is, Marvin Monroe, I always get his name wrong. I think it's Marvin. The fat bastard. The fat bastard with the glasses, and he speaks like this. Yeah, I really like this character. Obviously, he's a character that the Simpsons creators obviously did not like, because they ended up getting rid of him and actually killing him off. They confirmed that he was killed off at some point. Which is a real shame, because in the earlier days of The Simpsons, which you'll notice in this series, next series, and next few seasons actually, is that he is shown so much, Monroe. He's quite a big character in the early days, and then he's just forgotten about just like that, and they say he's dead now, because they don't like him. It's a real shame. Nonetheless, they have a psychiatric evaluation. Monroe is shocked and obviously disgusted by just checking it was still recording. He's shocked and disgusted by their behaviour, and he eventually gives them all their money back, because he's unable to solve their problem. They eventually go home all bummed out because they were unable to be fixed, and so they buy the TV back, and then off they go. A few things to mention. Firstly, why is it Homer, of all characters, that is getting stressed out over the way his family are behaving? Like, I don't know, I feel like, considering in later seasons Homer's the dumbass who doesn't really give a shit about what he is, and he's a big fat slob, I feel like it's kind of inappropriate now because it was out of character nowadays. Back then it would have made sense, but here it's sort of out of character. Like, why isn't it like Lisa or Marge who is the character who is disgusted and appalled by the family's behaviour and decides to go for a psychiatric evaluation? And also, like, why is Homer getting rid of the TV? He's the one character who you'd think would, he's the character you'd think would want the TV to be safe, you know. But then again, I'm also thinking to myself, at the same time, this is the early Simpsons. This is when Homer wasn't a complete dumbass and wasn't, you know, so brain dead that he couldn't even look at himself in the mirror without punching it, you know. This is the Homer which still had some sense of intelligence. He was the lovable sort of idiot here, there and everywhere, and he was also the angry but hard-working dad at this time, you know, not the dumbass. So I guess at the time it would have made sense. Nowadays it doesn't, so that is a little bit iffy. It is kind of an out-of-date episode if you really think about it like that. Obviously I do like the psychiatric evaluation. They're forced to do pictures of each other, and Homer, obviously being the idiot, he draws a plane as opposed to the other family members who draw Homer. Which then brings me back to my previous point, why is Homer the one getting stressed out one? I feel like it would have been better if it was another character as opposed to Homer, you know. It wouldn't make sense if it was Bart, obviously, but Marge or Lisa, why couldn't it have been one of those two? I digress. This episode is fine, perfectly. If I'm perfectly honest, it's not the best episode. It's not an episode that's going to be thrilling. It's a comedic episode for sure, and there's a lot more gags in this episode, but it's not. It's a fine episode, you know. It's not brilliant, it's not great, but it's fine. You know, I like how at the end of the day the family realise, you know, it doesn't really matter what we are. We're still a family. We're still who we are. We're not going to be this picture perfect family that you see on TV, what have you. Which I do quite like, that message. I do like that moral. You know, as a whole, like I said, it's a fine episode. It doesn't make sense in the aspect that it's Homer getting annoyed. Doesn't make sense that Homer's the one that's selling the TV. You know, there's a lot of things that don't really make that much sense, and obviously you got to remember it is also the time that this episode was released. So it's a perfect 7 out of 10 from me, personally. So the previous episodes have been quite fine, if I'm perfectly honest, with the exception of Homer's Odyssey, which I didn't really like that much. This episode is about to blow those other episodes out the park. This episode is fan-fucking-tastic. But the General is a brilliant episode for Series 1. It's a prime example of why early Simpsons is better than modern Simpsons. So, essentially what this episode is, Bart and Lisa are going to school. Lisa's being a stuck-up and she's going to deliver cakes to her teacher, and Bart obviously thinks that she's only doing it to get good grades. Obviously she isn't. She's the goody-goody two-shoe. Bart wants a cupcake, and of course Lisa, quite reluctantly, although quite mischievously, gives him the cupcake, obviously after, you know, rubbing it against the floor and what have you, and giving it to him. And they eventually go to school. As they get to school, some of Nelson's thugs, who you only ever see in the early days of Simpsons these days, they are probably dead, like with Monroe, Dr. Monroe. We will miss you. But I digress. Nelson's thugs come over, they smash up the cupcakes, and Bart pushes them to the ground. And of course then comes Nelson. Nelson comes over to bully Bart. Bart obviously punches Nelson, and Nelson doesn't even flinch. However, he then realises there's blood coming out of his nose, and of course he's shocked because he thought it was the blood of Bart. So Nelson then declares, essentially declares that he's going to bully Bart for the remainder of the year and every day of his miserable life. Bart has horrific nightmares of him being murdered by Nelson, and you know, it's this shocking story where poor old Bart is being bullied, and you can really feel bad for the character. You feel really bad for Bart because you know that he's just a kid, and obviously, you know, he's got his whole life ahead of him. I say this about an animated character, Jesus Christ. As I was saying, he has got his whole life ahead of him. He's obviously a bullying incident at school isn't really going to affect your life in any sense of the word. But when you're a kid, it's the most horrific thing ever. I can't really say much because I've never been bullied in my entire life. I've always stayed away from those types of people. I've always been sort of the middle ground sort of person, if you know what I mean. I've always been the average Joe who got on with, you know, this person and that person, but I never really socialised as much, if you know what I mean. I was just the middle ground, the person who never got wrong, wasn't on the bad sides of anyone, if you know what I mean. But I digress. But bullying gets so bad that he starts crying, he gets really upset, he's getting bruises all over, and it's this point that Homer, after giving him some duff advice, he then goes to his grandfather who fought in World War II. His grandfather then shows him off to, I've got the name right here, Herman. Yes, Herman. Herman is a character who's really underplayed in The Simpsons, considering his, you know, I wouldn't say importance, but his unique appearance, I should say, uniqueness. Herman, who's the one-armed man who is an arms dealer. Of course, Bart then learns from Herman some tactics to deal with Nelson, and obviously he then recruits the whole of the kids from Springfield to go to war with Nelson. They all start wearing army helmets. Bart commands them into battle. He does all these brilliant things. I just love this episode. I really do. And eventually they meet Nelson. Nelson is at the arcade with his two thugs, and Bart then sends the kids out with war balloons and what have you, and they start having this massive fight against Nelson in the streets and in the tree houses and what have you, and eventually they defeat Nelson. They tie him up and they force Nelson to write this treaty in which they cannot bully Bart, he cannot do this, he cannot do that, and obviously Bart has to do these things as well, and of course Nelson eventually agrees. They release him and they leave on a mutual respect, and I fucking love this episode. I love the progress this episode is. It's a proper 3-act structure episode. You know, you got the beginning act where Bart is essentially at the bottom. He is being beaten, he's crying, he's being bullied in such a horrific fashion. Then you got the middle, which is him growing up. It's him growing as a character. It's him, you know, training all the other kids to fight Nelson. And then you have the finale, which is the big battle itself, and it is just fantastic. It's so satisfactory. That's what it is. It's satisfactory. It's so funny as well. There's a lot of really fun gags here and there. I like how Herman's backstory is he didn't lose his arm in the Vietnam War, but rather he lost his arm because he waved his arm out of the bus window and it was taken off as a car drove past. Obviously in a later season of The Simpsons, and when I mean later I mean by one of the modern episodes, they do retcon it to him sticking his arm out in the road, and obviously it gets hit by a car. But I prefer the school bus story because I think that's just hilarious, considering the fact that that is such a fake story, and to know that someone out there genuinely lost their arm. This episode is just great. I love Bart the General. I really do. This is one of those 10 out of 10 episodes. It's one of my all-time favourite episodes as it is, so obviously I'm going to be really biased for it as opposed to against it. So yeah, this is definitely one of my top 10 favourite episodes of The Simpsons as a whole. It's a perfect 10 out of 10, as I mentioned. It's an episode that I totally recommend everyone to watch. It's the best episode from Series 1. So no other episode from this series is going to be as good as this. You know, the problem with this DVD is the fact that they've got it in like a swirly pattern. So you have to like read the names of each episode in a swirly pattern. What's even worse is it has one of the worst DVD menus I think I've ever experienced when it comes to full seasons of shows. Because usually when it's a full season, they have like all the individual episodes that you can watch individually if you want. And they also have a play all button. Series 1 and Series 2 for that aspect does not. You have to individually select each episode. So if you're one of these people like me who likes to put the DVD on in the background while you're typing away or playing some game, you're forced to individually select each episode, and it has this awful, you know, do not copy in Australia and what have you, in all these other European countries, because they have to have that warning, this, that and the other. So yeah, that's really annoying. Enough about the DVD, let's talk about Moaning Lisa. Moaning Lisa, Lisa is really down in the dumps. She's not really happy. She, and family try out their best to try and cheer her up, and obviously she's not being cheered up. She's still quite down in the dumps. Eventually she meets Bleeding Gums. I forgot his last name, but that's just my stupidity right there. So meets a jazz player called Bleeding Gums, and Bleeding Gums, he it's a big inspiration to Lisa, and of course he tells her that you should really just love life, you should relax, you should, you know, express your feelings and all that. And Lisa does so, and eventually the family, you know, they realise like what's going on with poor Lisa, and they realise, you know, her issues here and there. And of course it ends with Lisa, you know, singing her song about her feelings, what have you, out in the open, in a jazz concert at the very end. So this episode is sort of the first, in my opinion, episode of a bad Lisa episode. And what I mean by bad Lisa episode, I mean by this, okay, I'm not going to say this episode is bad. This episode is just actually really, really good. But in terms of what it's trying to say and what it's trying to do, it's kind of a, that's the DVD there. It's kind of a bad Lisa episode. It's what I mean by bad Lisa episode, I keep saying this and I'm going to fucking get to it in a minute. It's an episode in which Lisa moans or bitches about something, and then she blames everyone else even though it isn't necessarily their fault, and then she gets her own way in the end. And this is something that would become a running trend in pretty much every single series of The Simpsons, at least in one episode after the other. And I'm going to warn you right now, in Series 2 there's another example of this, and it is fucking awful. It's, in my opinion, the only bad episode of Series 2, so spoiler alert for Series 2, there is a bad episode. And, you know, I've already done a review on A Clear Day I Can't See My Sister. That's another prime example of a bad Lisa episode, but for a different reason. It's where, you know, it's at the point where the Simpson writers thought, you know what, Lisa deserves to have more credit, so we're going to make her into the most unlikable bitch ever. So, for those that have seen that review, you may remember I've mentioned this before. I think Lisa Simpson is one of the most unlikable characters in any animated show ever. And this episode, and the good thing about the earlier Simpsons, I should mention before I continue, Lisa isn't too bad. She's alright, but she isn't good. Like, she's kind of a bland character. And this episode sort of suffers from that. Lisa, in the previous episodes, has always been sort of just there. She's not really done anything, really. She's somewhat been the voice of reason here and there, like acknowledging that Bart is, you know, not a genius, or acknowledging that doing this is not going to go well. And this episode does something very... It's trying to give Lisa a bit more character, a bit more personality, and I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to point out that Lisa is this really creative soul, and that she's, you know, really good at what she does and what have you. But she's not allowed to express her creativity. And I do like that idea. I do like that. I do like how school as a whole pretends to express creativity. It pretends to express that you can be this, you can be that, but the reality is you're not allowed to do anything. You're a piece of shit. That's like that sort of mentality. I do admire that, that I do like that Lisa does get really bummed out about that. I can understand. But she blames her parents. She blames her parents, she blames her brother. And throughout the episode, they don't do anything bad to her. Not once do they do anything bad. They're actually trying to help her, and yet she blames them. Do you get what I'm trying to say? It doesn't make that much sense. I can understand her getting angry with the school, getting angry with the kids, because the kids, you know, they think it's strange when Lisa starts smiling and tries to act all happy and tries to act all hip, you know. But instead she blames her parents and her brother, her family, for trying to help her. That doesn't go well for me personally. Like I said, it's not a bad episode. It's a decent enough episode. It's something that you can enjoy. It's not as bad as Homer's Odyssey. But that is kind of a big distraction. Moaning Lisa truly deserves its title of Moaning Lisa, because she is moaning for no fucking reason. I do love the character of Bleeding Gums. He's a wonderful, you know, wise character. I really love him so much. It's, you know, obviously he's another character that the Simpsons creators did not like, and they do end up killing him off. In an episode, actually, they don't just kill him off like poor Monroe who gets fucking murdered off screen, but, you know. As a whole, it's a 6 out of 10 for me. The Call of the Simpsons is essentially a comedic episode. It's not a episode that's going to have some big more. It's not an episode that's going to try and be all, you know, fancy and, you know, give us a really dramatic story or give us a really good, you know, challenging, make you think sort of episode. It's a comedic, straightforward, funny episode, nothing else. And when I was mentioning about first series syndrome, this is a prime example of first series syndrome. How many animated shows can you think of that decide it's a good idea to dedicate one entire episode, right, that they're in the wilderness, you know, on some sort of camping trip, on some sort of, you know, leisurely ride or something like that, and shit goes down, something bad happens, and it ends in like hilarity and shenanigans. How many shows can you think of? I can think of plenty. You know, South Park, for example, they had an episode where they decide they're going to be in the wilderness and shit happens in the wilderness. You know, in the first series, this episode is just the same. It's obviously this came out way before South Park, but it's like, how many shows do this? And I don't understand the obsession with these wilderness episodes at all. You know, I don't really find this episode that funny either. So, yeah, they go on a camping trip. The camping trip goes awry, and as a result, Homer and Bart get split up from Maggie, who gets split up from Lisa and Marge. Maggie ends up finding 3 bears, and the 3 bears raise her as their own. Bart and Homer are lost in the wilderness, while Lisa and Marge manage to find civilization. So, the 2 women are going out to try and search for their husband and son/brother, and obviously look out and find out where the hell Maggie has gone. So, meanwhile the boys, they have to like scavenge for food, and Homer eventually like gets covered in mud, and everyone thinks that he is Bigfoot, because I believe, if I remember rightly, because I did see these past few days, I should have written some more notes. I've written a few, but I haven't written as much. I believe he gets stung by a bunch of wasps or bees because he tries eating some honey, and because it stings his mouth and stuff, and he can't speak, and so he goes, "Ah!" as he's covered in mud. They think he's Bigfoot. There is this funny little gag where the press like interview Marge about the whereabouts of her husband and son, and of course they then discover Bigfoot, and there's this flip-a-rama of this newspaper saying Bigfoot found, and then Marge says, "That's not Bigfoot, that's my husband." Of course then it says Bigfoot, I married Bigfoot, and then of course he's called Homer, and that continuous gag where the newspaper is just printed out within seconds of someone saying something, which is highly accurate to the news these days, because I have news apps on my phone, and by God, they love to like publish a story immediately after it's just been like announced or said, or something has happened. Like, you know, the amount of times that I've seen Sky News and like some terrorist attack has happened and they say 12 people are dead. Oh no, it's actually 2 people. No, it's a 500. It's like it's a prime example of just going straight ahead and creating confusion and delay. But aside from that, this episode, it's not a bad episode. You know, I do like how the bears like treat Maggie. I do like that. I like how they eventually come back together. I love the 3 different stories going on at once. I love how each character, you know, goes through like different scenarios. But for the love of me, I just don't find this episode that funny. I don't really find it that interesting. I find it kind of a bland episode, kind of a meh episode. So one of those episodes which you can really just forget about. And that's the problem. This is an episode which you can just forget about. You can literally skip past this episode and you will not miss anything. Not saying that, you know, downright hilarious episodes, you know, episodes that don't have necessarily a plot to say the very least and just goes out to be funny, are bad or anything, but there is a danger that you can make them forgetful. I think if I'm going to give this episode a rating, because I don't think it's a bad episode and I don't think it's a good episode, I'm going to have to just give it a 50-50 rating, a 5 out of 10. Literally, it's a very forgettable episode. You can just skip it and you will not miss a damn thing. That said, you know, I'm sure some people might find it funny. I didn't. So, yeah. It's a 5 out of 10 for me. It's a 50-50 average. Just dead on average episode. So after the really average episode of The Call of the Simpsons, we then get an extremely famous episode, that being the Telltale Head. I always get that confused. So if you don't know what this episode is, go home and watch The Simpsons. Just watch The Simpsons, or play... Oh, just, you don't know what The Simpsons is if you don't know this episode. This episode is very, very famous, and the reason being is it's where Jebediah's head gets cut off. You know, if you've watched a modern day Simpsons, you'll notice that they cut off the head of Jebediah Simpson and it falls on top of Ralph and the ice cream hits the head, and obviously that's in the introduction of all the modern episodes. In the video game, Simpsons Hit and Run, you can hit the Jebediah head and it will fall off. This episode is the catalyst. This is the episode which created that head coming off scenario. So Bart wants to impress some really cool kids. These cool kids being, you know, these thuggish kids, or teenagers I should say, such as Jimbo Jones and his 2 friends, who are Kearney, and I don't remember the long-haired one at all. Like, I can only remember Kearney and Jimbo Jones. I never caught the name of the other one. But I digress. So he wants to impress them. He hangs out with them, and of course at one point they say, you know, I really would love to cut that stupid statue's head off. And of course Bart thinks, hey, he's the fan of Springfield, you know, how can you want to cut off the head of Jebediah Springfield? And of course they mock him, and of course he doesn't like being mocked. Homer then gives Bart the advice that if you want to be friends with people, you just have to go with the flow. You have to impress them. So of course Bart takes that advice literally and decides to cut off the head of the statue of Jebediah Springfield. Upon doing so, the whole town falls into this deep depression. They are shocked and saddened over the fact that his head has been lobbed off. This patriotic, you know, behaviour from all the town folks, it really affects everyone, and including Bart. Bart himself then gets nervous because, you know, on Krusty the Clown's show, which I believe is the first ever time you ever see Krusty the Clown, by the way. I think this episode genuinely is the first time you see Krusty the Clown. You know, he then announces to the kids, and even on the news, if you find the person who does it, bring them to justice or just kill them. And obviously that does take an effect because you have people searching all over the place for the person who cut off the head. Bart, having this big guilty conscience, having illusions of the head talking to him, then announces to his family that he's cut off the head. It then goes to Homer, who, you know, gets angry at Bart, but of course Bart then tells the family that, hey, I was told that I should follow my heart, I should follow the cool kids and all that, and Homer, feeling a bit of responsibility, believes, oh shit, I kind of put that in his head, I'm going to help you put the head back on Jebediah. They obviously don't succeed because they get caught by the townsfolk, and of course then Bart tells the whole story, which is essentially the whole episode, because I forgot to mention, at the very beginning of the episode you have Bart and Homer, they're talking about how Homer has done a few bad things in the past and how, you know, the townsfolk are going to be really nice people, they're going to forgive you, just like that. Obviously they don't, they chase him up, and of course Bart says, before you kill me, let me tell you the whole story, and of course you get the whole story. This is a very memorable episode, obviously, for the Jebediah's head being cut off, but it's just a fun little story. It's a great little story about, you know, following the pride of, or following, you know, the crowd, and how that can have severe consequences. You know, it has this, you know, feeling of a patriarchy, not patriarchy, that's the wrong fucking word. I'm not a feminist, by the way, or one of the radical ones at least. I was meant to say patriarchy. Patriotism. That's the word. That's the word. Fuck me. You know, I tend to do that a lot. I always think of a word and then I say it incorrectly, and I realise I say it incorrectly, and I have to just redo it again. This is why, you know, if you've ever seen some of my edited recordings, you'll know that I end up like editing words and I also sound really loud all of a sudden. But luckily this is spontaneous, so I'm not allowing these mistakes. I digress. So, you know, the dangers of this patriotism around the town, you know, and obviously doing something bad and admitting to your crimes, you know, admitting that you fucked up, here's the consequences, you gotta admit it, you have to stand up, and you have to take it like a man. And that's what Bart does really well in this episode, and I really do enjoy this episode. It's got a lot of funny gags, it's got loads of great visuals. I love the idea of Bart's guilty conscious, you know, imagining the head actually talking to him. I love the idea of him following the crowd and then realising, you know, following the crowd isn't necessarily a good idea. I love how Homer himself also takes a bit of responsibility for this. You know, something you would not get in a modern Simpsons episode. Modern Simpsons episode would treat Homer as this dickhead who would, like, mock Bart for doing something like this. And, like, act really stupid and goofy and, like, a fucking Looney Tune and run out the window or something like that. This episode does it so well. I really do enjoy this episode. It's no wonder so many people consider this the best episode of the series. One, obviously, I still think Bart the General is so fucking fantastic. That blows this one out of the park. But this one does deserve a high rating. It deserves a high rating of 9 out of 10, in my personal opinion. It's a great way to introduce like some certain characters like Jimbo Jones and Kearney and obviously Krusty the Clown. But aside from that, it's just a delightful episode. It's an episode that is really memorable, and yeah, I really enjoy it. Life on the Fast Lane. I'm getting reminiscence of that song from, is it Mad World or is it Anarchy Reigns? I can't quite remember which one it is, but they have a song called Life on the Fast Lane. I think it might be Anarchy Reigns because it's a bit more goofier than that one. But nonetheless, in this we have Homer. He forgets that it's his wife's birthday, and as a result he rushes out to grab her a present, but obviously he gets distracted and buys himself a present and gives it to Marge. That present being a bowling ball. Marge gets really pissed off and, you know, believes the marriage is on the lines as a result because Homer doesn't care about anyone but himself. And obviously Marge then takes her bowling to spite Homer, and she meets someone who's this really dashing, you know, really intelligent, really you know, romantic chap, and as a result she has a little bit of a fling with him, but she eventually realises that she does love her husband, and they reunite. The end. The reason why I rushed through that summary is, simply put, it's the type of episode that would be repeated time and 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 time again, so many times that this is the episode that pretty much starts that trend. You know, the trend where Homer forgets it's someone's birthday or anniversary, gets that person a present which actually should be for him, and instead he gets it for them. Well, he gets a present that he likes himself, but he doesn't really think about the person themselves. He pisses that person off and they don't like him anymore, so he worries about it. The other characters try and spite him. They then learn to love him, and yeah, it's done with Bart, it's done with Lisa, and it's done with Marge on multiple other occasions in future episodes, and it's been done so many times that it's kind of distracting in this episode when you're watching it back, because you know that it's gonna happen again. You know it's gonna happen again and again and again and again. The same plot is gonna be repeated over and over again. And it's gonna drive you around the bend, and it's a little bit of a nuisance, to say the very least. But nonetheless, this episode, what this episode does well that the other episodes don't, is that straight away Marge is angry with Homer because Homer immediately forgets. He rushes out. He knows how important it is to her, and he still does it. And he not only ruins the evening, he ruins her cake, and he gives her a present which she doesn't want or care about. And I believe she also tells him, what she does want. So yeah, that is something that this episode does do better than other episodes, should I say the very least, because I know other episodes do try and do it, but they fuck up massively. This episode, obviously, it's still not a brilliant episode because, Marge falls in love with this really attractive, really, smart individual. After she goes bowling, she is still out to bowl, and yeah, not much to say about this episode other than you're going to end up seeing it multiple times. You're going to end up seeing it so many times, in fact, that, well, I say it so many times, so many different variations of the same episode in future episodes, that watching the first ever attempt at doing this type of episode, the way I feel, in fact, is that if it didn't work the first time, don't bother doing it again. Especially if it fails the second time, or the third, or the fourth, or the fifth. It's like, this episode does annoy me because it did create that trend. It did create that trend of Homer as a selfish dumbass who only thinks about himself and no one else. And what's worse is, throughout this series so far, Homer hasn't been that selfish dumbass. He's been the person who has tried to improve his family. He's been the person who's been hard-working, who's been trying his best to impress and make his family happy. Then you have this episode which just blows out of the park. You have this episode which, ruins what was a good trend, a good, steady line of alright episodes. Yeah, I mean, he even tried to kill himself at one point because he thought he failed for the family, and having this episode, it does sort of create some issues if you think of continuity. But not only that, it's just a boring episode. It's not really that interesting. And I've already mentioned this a billion times already, it's going to get repeated. It's going to be done over and over again, and this is where it starts, and this is also where it ends. If I had to give it a rating out of 10, I guess it's not a 4 out of 10. It's not below 4. I'd say it's a 5. It's a mediocre episode. It's not really that interesting. I quite like the bowling expert who's a smarty pants who Marge falls for. I do like him, and I do like that Marge is the one that's being quite promiscuous in this episode. However, it does create problems in a future episode, but we'll get there. Remember when I was saying that Marge being promiscuous in the last episode was, alright, but it's going to create problems in future episodes? Well, believe it or not, the next episode in Series 1 is Homer's Night Out. Speaking of the problems that it's going to create, so in the way that The Simpsons seems to work is, without being rude to anyone who may be of a certain political opinion, it's a very liberal show. As a result, everything left-wing in The Simpsons is seen as the greatest thing ever. It's seen as a purity. It's seen as fantastic. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. Anything right-wing is seen as the evil or the worst thing to ever happen since, you know, Hitler. it's that sort of mentality, and as a result, a lot of those liberal mentalities continue through to even the smallest of things. That includes adultery, and previous episode seems to indicate that it's fine for a woman, in particular Marge, to do this, but as soon as Homer dares to be on a stag do and dance with a woman, not even like have any relations whatsoever to her, it's seen as the worst thing ever. So Homer gets a photograph taken of him by Bart, because Bart gets this spy camera and he thinks it's really cool. As a result, he goes around and he takes photos of you know, things here, there and everywhere, and at one point he takes a photo of Homer, who is on a stag do. He just so happened to be in the same restaurant at the time, because the family are eating out, and Homer's on a stag do with this person who's about to get married. And here Bart sneaks around, he finds Homer, he takes a photo of Homer dancing with the stripper, and for whatever reason this episode seems to treat that as like the worst thing ever. It seems to treat it like, you know, oh, you murdered 1 billion people. Like, oh no, you're perfectly fine, but you dare dance with a stripper, you're the evil one. And it's strange. It really is strange. It's like, it doesn't really make sense. Like, Marge gets unnecessarily aggressive and angry in this episode. And it's really, really strange. Considering the previous episode, you just did the same thing. I don't think of one to talk about. I mean, I guess you could argue that The Simpsons doesn't really have a continuity, to say the very least. But saying that, they do mention previous events in other episodes will mention previous events in other episodes and what have you. And now our plot lines are continued, so that doesn't make sense. So, you know, that, what I mean by it doesn't make sense, I mean the idea that it doesn't have a continuity, that doesn't really make sense when you do mention you do have a continuity, but, you know, fuck me, right? This episode isn't a good episode. It's a hypocritical episode, and it's unnecessarily biased against poor old Homer. You know, the message is Homer shouldn't have been acting so wild and that. But the real reason why Marge is angry is not because of that, but because Homer is setting a bad example to Bart. Bart, who snuck round and took a picture and decided to spread it out to everyone else, and yet Homer's the one in trouble because he isn't treating women correctly. That's literally what happens, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's an episode where the message just gets thrown all over the place. It's like, this is the message. No, this is going to be the... No, this is the message. Like, and it's like, they don't have any clear guidance. It's like, it's on a straight line for like the first, like, 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden it's like zigzag. Almost like a sound wave. It's just crazy. It's like, there's no clear road. It's just all over the place, this episode. And, you know, as I was mentioning, the whole idea that Marge is angry with Homer because he's mistreating women comes out of nowhere. It's not hinted at, it's not built up upon, it's not even shown. All Homer was doing was dancing next to the stripper. not, you know, sexually harassing her, not, you know, saying vulgar and horrific things to her, not doing anything wrong, just dancing next to her because he's a goofball. And yet, it's treated as like the worst fucking thing ever, and boy does this plot lose its message. And at the end, Homer is forced to apologise to the lady, and then he does this big speech of how you should treat your women correctly. You know, despite the fact that the woman in this episode is seen as a happy and perfectly fine with her job, so that also gets thrown out of the way. You can't have an episode, here's the thing, you can't have an episode of a certain plotline, with a certain story, and then just throw in all these different ideas halfway through and say, that's a perfect episode. This episode fucking sucks. It deserves a 3 out of 10. Simply put, because it's awful. In fact, 3 out of 10 is too high. 2 out of 10. It's not cohesive. It's not clear. Its message is thrown in there out of random for no discernible reason. There's no, you know, there's nothing to it. There's nothing to it at all. You know, why couldn't Bart just admit to Marge, or, you know, why couldn't Bart just be a little shit and say to everyone that Homer is cheating on my mother, I should say, not my wife, and, you know, think that Homer's being romantic towards this woman. How about Bart says all these things and creates these malicious lies? This creates a split up. And then Bart realises that this is causing him real trouble because Homer and Marge, they're just depressed. They don't like being apart from each other. And obviously Bart has caused this. And then Bart admits to Marge, you know, actually I lied about it. Fair enough. It wouldn't be a good episode, but it would have been a better fucking episode than this. And they get together and it's all happy endings. This episode fucking sucks. It's between a 2 to a 3 out of 10 for me. It's a bad episode. Skip it. So the next episode is The Crepes of Wrath. The Crepes of Wrath is about Homer getting into an accident because of the boy. Obviously Principal Skinner is also pissed off with Bart, and they decide they're going to do this foreign exchange student program. They're going to send Bart to France, and the Simpson family are going to get this another kid, you know, stay with them for a while, and I believe it's from Bulgaria. I don't really remember. It's during the time when, you know, there was problems in Europe, let's just say. Shit. Bulgaria, I don't remember. But they get a kid from a country which has a lot of spies, and obviously they are a little bit wary of this kid. And this kid obviously does sneak and find out intel from a nuclear power plant and gives it back to his government. Meanwhile, Bart is forced to stay with these 2 wine brewers, or distillers I should say. They are very cruel to Bart. They force him to sleep outside, they steal his hat, they, you know, don't feed him, they don't give him any drinks, they force him to work without any pay. And obviously Bart is pretty much down in the bush. Meanwhile the Simpsons family are having a whale of time. They don't have the boy there to, you know, pester them or piss them off. So they're having a good time. Eventually it gets to the end of the episode, or near towards the 3rd act, Bart eventually finds a policeman because he's pissed off because he doesn't know French, and of course then he starts saying stuff in French because after staying in France for such a time he's learned how to speak French. He speaks fluent French. All of a sudden tells the policeman that, hey, these 2 guys, they've been doing this to me, they've been abusing me, this, that and the other. He gets awarded, you know, and treated as a hero in France, and everyone loves Bart. Meanwhile, the family are in trouble with the FBI because they discover that they're harbouring this kid who is essentially a terrorist, and obviously things don't go so well for them in the end. But I do like that. I do like that this episode does sort of do these polar opposite stories. There's one story which is really good, one story that's really bad, and then all of a sudden they swap sides. The good episode has a bad ending, and the bad story has a really good ending. And I do quite like that. You know, I believe this is the first ever time that we ever see more of the Simpsons world, because in previous episodes we've only just been stuck in Springfield. We've not been able to go to other places. So I do like that. That said, it's a decent episode. It's not an episode that's going to be remembered or revived or anything like that. It's a decent episode. I do like that Bart's story has a good payoff, and, you know, same with the family, you know, even though their story isn't as good. But aside from that, can't really think of much to talk about. It's just a alright episode. You know, it's forgettable. It's one of these episodes you probably miss out and won't really. And if you do watch it, you'll probably forget about it within seconds. You won't really find it memorable in any slightest way. But aside from that, it's also quite an alright episode. It's not particularly funny. Like that's the thing. It's not particularly funny. So, yeah, if I'm perfectly honest, it's a 6 out of 10 for me. It's not the best episode in the world, but hey, it's fine. So after having mediocre episode with a bad episode with another mediocre episode, we're about to have a really good episode. Don't you worry, kids. It's called Krusty Gets Busted. Yes, we're almost to the series finale now. And Krusty Gets Busted is a great episode. So the idea is Homer goes to the Quickie Mart. He's going to go grab some stuff to avoid Patty and Selma's slideshow of their holiday. While there, Krusty holds up Apu, forcing him to give over a bunch of money. Give over a load of money. And Apu, obviously, he gives over the money, and it turns out it's Krusty. Oh, I've just said it's Krusty the Clown. Okay, Krusty the Clown steals from Apu. He gets away, and Homer is obviously a witness. The police arrive, and this is also the first appearance of Chief Wiggum, by the way. Funnily enough, Chief Wiggum appears later. I believe Chief Wiggum may have appeared in the Telltale Head, actually. Can't quite remember. But what I do know is that Lou, and Eddie, they appear before Chief Wiggum. Yeah, they actually appear in the 3rd episode, Homer's Odyssey, instead of Chief Wiggum appearing before then. Just an interesting fact for you. So, yeah, they arrest Krusty because they know it's him, and Sideshow Bob, his sidekick, I'm going to just call him his sidekick, his partner in crime, quite literally, is, you know, takes over the Krusty show and gives this more formal and more intelligent show. Obviously, all the kids still enjoy it. They enjoy Sideshow Bob, and Sideshow Bob obviously becomes this really big, famous person. And as Sideshow Bob is so famous, you know, no one knows except for Bart that Sideshow Bob is in fact the real culprit. Bart discovers that, you know, for one thing, Krusty was looking at microwaves and he has a pacemaker. Can't go near microwaves. Secondly, Krusty can't read, he's illiterate. And of course, Krusty was seen reading. Not only that, Krusty had big feet, and Krusty actually has small, normal-sized feet. Sideshow Bob, on the other hand, is intelligent, he can read, he doesn't have a pacemaker, and he has big feet. Bart discovers this, he tells it out in front of the world on live television, and eventually Sideshow Bob gets arrested, Krusty's amended, and of course everyone apologises to Krusty. This episode is a great episode. This isn't necessarily the first appearance of Sideshow Bob or Krusty, you know, we've seen them before in the Telltale Head, but we get a bit more context between the two. We know that Krusty is a bit of a grumpy bastard, but we also know that he's not necessarily, you know, the funny clown that we all know from the previous episode. He can be quite... He does have his, like, problems. He can't read, he has a pacemaker, and etc, etc. Sideshow Bob, on the other hand, this character who we only saw, like, briefly in the Telltale Head, like, playing with a slide whistle, he... You know, we get a bit more character from him. We find out that he hates his job. He hates being treated as this muppet who's blown out of cannons and beaten up on stage. He rather would do a more formal, more intelligent show. You know, we find out that he's a bit more of a cunning individual. He's a bit more sly. And I really enjoy that. I love how we get a bit more context between these characters, we get a bit more world building from these characters. And obviously the whole mystery behind Krusty getting busted, and obviously Bart discovering who, what is that, or how I put it, discovers like who really committed the crime. It's brilliant. I love the way that it's done. I love how he, observes all these little things, such as Krusty's inability to read. Krusty has a pacemaker, and Krusty doesn't have big feet, and he realises that Sideshow Bob does, and it does get ruined by one thing. I would have loved it if we didn't know who the bad guy was, but this episode does sound really silly, and halfway through, Sideshow Bob gives this big speech about how, he misses Krusty, and Krusty was such a beloved man. And then as he's like pretending to cry, he then starts laughing maniacally behind the door, because he walks through like this makeup room, the changing room, should I say, as interviewers have just tried to interview, and he shuts the door, and as he's pretending to cry, he starts laughing maniacally. And that gives you straight away, that's him, he's the culprit. I really wish they didn't do that. I really wish they kept it all secret. I wish they did keep having Sideshow Bob like in front of the camera, trying to push it towards you and say, hey, this guy might be the culprit, he could be someone who's, tricking Krusty. And I would have loved if they did that. I would have loved if they just kept it a bit more of a secret, and then you find out the whole story, then find out the real criminal behind the whole situation, and you get told like why he's the criminal, you get told all the clues, and then he gives his backstory, he gives his story about why he did it. I really would have preferred if they did do that, which is a real shame, because this episode was really, really good. It deserves, in my opinion, a 9 out of 10. It's certainly a brilliant episode, but it's just ruined by that one moment. I wish that one moment just didn't happen. And now we are on our final episode. So, for a final episode of the series, you'd think it's going to be some big, explosive, something major, Krusty Gets Busted was a really good episode. So how's it going to end? It ends with some enchanted evening. Yeah. This episode is... how do I put it? This episode is kind of underwhelming for a series finale. Okay, so the idea is Homer and Marge, they want to go out on a date tonight, and for this date night they decide quite simply that they want to they decide that they want to spend the whole night together. However, they can't get a babysitter because Bart and Lisa are troublesome and are pains in the asses. So I'm getting a bit of a cough. So Bart and Lisa get a babysitter. This babysitter is quite aggressive and mean, and doesn't seem to care about them. But she will put them in front of the TV and force them to watch the Little Elves Save Christmas, or whatever they were watching. I don't quite remember. It's Little Elves something. And this behind the scenes, obviously, they find out while watching the news briefly that there's a evil babysitter on the loose who steals shit and gets away with it just like that. After babysitting the kids, the kids obviously end up getting tied up or oblivious to the situation. They discover that their babysitter is stealing shit. So Lisa tries to call the police, and Bart tries to apprehend the babysitter. It doesn't go according to plan. Bart, Lisa get tied up. However, Maggie isn't tied up. Maggie manages to free him, and the three kids end up trapping the babysitter. They tie her up, force her to watch the Little Elves, and they go off to call the police. They call the police, and the police say they're arriving. As they're starting to arrive, Homer and Marge arrive at home. They discover the babysitter tied up. They're so saddened by it. They pay her extra. Obviously, they pick up her bags, which is full of the stolen loot. And then the police arrive, but they arrive too late, and Homer and Marge are dumbfounded when they realise that they've just released a, serial thief. Yeah, it's kind of a meh episode. It's not really the most spectacular or explosive episode of all time, it's not season finale. if you know what I mean. You know, when I think of series finales, I think of a really, you know, big and, you know, flashy sort of finale. You know, not every finale has to be like that, obviously, but something a bit more, you know, wow, a bit more like in your face. This is meh. You can definitely tell this is just a meh episode. It's just not very interesting. You don't really care about this babysitter. You don't really care about the whole situation. I mean, it does do a few good things right. I like the ending. I like that instead of like going with the cliche, you know, how dare you mistreat the babysitter, and you know, then all the police arriving just in time, and of course the parents are getting angry with the police of why this is happening, and they attack the kids and that sort of situation. The situation where the babysitter gets away, and of course the police are told to go away because there's nothing there, or they don't believe that the babysitter was there. Stuff like that. That sort of cliche ending where, you know, the kids are in trouble and they don't succeed. I do like that they do have regrets, the parents. I do like how Homer and Marge have regret at the end. They are just so shocked and feel so stupid for what they've done. I like that. Most shows do similar episodes and they don't do that. They like treat the parents as if they are like they're oblivious to the obvious, and they, you know, punish the kids for no reason because the kids actually did the right thing. I do like that they didn't punish the kids. I do like that they feel like they're the ones that have been punished. You know, and of course it is counteracted with the fact that they have a really nice flashy evening and they're having the whale of the time while the kids are having this horrific experience. At the end of the day, it's just a meh episode. It's a very basic and mediocre episode. It's not bad, it's not good, it's sort of in the middle. It's a 5 out of 10 for me. It's certainly a forgettable episode. It's not one that most people will remember or care about. So we have finally reached the end of Series 1 of The Simpsons. What do I think overall? Well, there are a few good episodes. You know, I think the beginning half of The Simpsons was better than the later half, but that's just my opinion. It's a short season in comparison to the other seasons, which have like 20 odd episodes, and this only had like, I think I had like 10 maybe, I don't quite remember. I should probably count the episodes on the thing. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 13 episodes, never mind. So it has like a 13 episode count. It's not as long as some of the other episodes, which are like 20 to 25 or even 30 episodes. But that said, I can understand why people don't really care for Series 1. I must admit, like, I thought going into this, like, I was going to say so many positive things about Series 1, and then I, you know, started to rewatch it for the reviews, obviously, and I felt like it's not as good. It's not bad either. It doesn't deserve like a low rating. It doesn't deserve a 5 out of 10. It's just not brilliant. It's not spectacular. It does have a few good, you know, shining examples. I like Bart the Genius. I like Bart the General, which is fucking fantastic. I love the Telltale Head, and I love Krusty Gets Busted. These are really good episodes. These 4 episodes are spectacular. But it doesn't save this series. Those 4 episodes are just 4 episodes out of 13. As a result, I'm going to have to give this series a 6 out of 10. 6, 7 out of 10, around that area. 6.5 if you want to be nitty gritty about it. I think it could have done better. I mean, it does suffer from first series syndrome, but as a whole, it's not a bad series. It doesn't suck. It doesn't, you know, really get you angry, except for 2 episodes in particular, which I fucking hate. But, you know, one of them isn't, you know, a case of getting angry. It's just a case of it doesn't really feel satisfactory, and the other one is god awful. You know, that's the sort of situation that we're dealing with when it comes to this series, and most of the episodes are kind of meh and forgettable. They're kind of bland. They're just there to be episodes. I don't really recommend checking it out, obviously, if you want to check it out, but you know, next time we're going to have Series 2. And I can already tell you right away that Series 2 is going to be much, much better than Series 1. Don't know when I'm going to be doing Series 2 at all, you know. But for the time being, I hope you enjoyed this first edition for the Simpsons reviews. Of course, Series 1, 6.5 out of 10. That's the final score. Yeah.